Hi, my name is Pam Killeen, and welcome to my podcast, Circadian Reboot, where we discuss everything circadian. And today on the show, I'm pleased to announce that we have Daniel White. He is a registered nutritionist, functional medicine, and circadian certified health coach. He is the founder of Sleep Better, Live Better, and the chairman of the Sleep Better, Live Better Foundation. His organization's mission is to deliver innovative sleep solutions that combine the best of science-backed education, behavioral change tools, and sleep products to help unlock the enormous pool of untapped human potential that results from being well rested. Over the past 2 years, Daniel's passion and focus have been the delivery of a charitable research project in local schools on his home island of Guernsey, empowering future generations with sleep education and blue light blocking glasses interventions to improve mental and physical health outcomes for adolescents and their families. The results of these trials have been very promising, and his vision is to upscale these projects to positively impact the lives of individuals in schools and institutions across the globe. In 2024, Daniel also joined forces with Jeff, Avi, and Lauren to form Quantumly and the Quantumly Foundation to provide science-based education and tools that can support the global community to improve health-related outcomes via the principles of circadian and quantum biology, beginning with the delivery of the CRD challenge, or the Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge, which we will be discussing quite a bit. Their vision is a world where future generations and their communities are living in rhythm with nature and enjoying vibrant health and well-being. Welcome to my podcast, Daniel White. I'm so thrilled that you're here today because I love the work that you're doing with what is called the Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge that you're going to be launching on October 20th. And thank you so much for allowing me to be an ambassador to this movement. It's a big theme in my life because I have been worried about all this screen time and all this artificial lighting, especially that our children are exposed to. And I know that you have quite a story to tell with regards to what happened to you when you got caught up in this, video gaming addiction issue. And I really appreciate your honesty and your forthrightness in terms of sharing your story, because I think it will help a lot of people. So if you don't mind, maybe we can launch with that story that you tell in other podcasts about what happened when you got caught up in video games.
Yeah, absolutely, Pam. So first of all, I would say thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast. It's an honour to be here. It's an honour to have you as an ambassador of the CRD challenge as well, which I'm sure we'll talk more about throughout the episode. I'm very happy to explore more and to really, open up about the things that I experienced. And I will say that these things were experienced primarily in my youth. So I'm now 31 years old, and the majority of the detriments, like the purest detriments that I was experiencing, were probably from around the age of like 13 to 16 or 17. But even in my adult life, there's a very delicate balance and a very tight rope that I've had to walk between my use of technology, social media, even video games in my adult years, and understanding that, the genie is out of the bottle in many ways with these technology devices and programs and platforms. And, we can polarize and we can say these things are terrible or these things are good or these things are bad. But I think, the reality is that the story isn't that straight. And for many people around the world, technology is a way in which we entertain ourselves, we communicate, we work, we connect with others. And so, we need to be able to really appreciate the contraindications of some of these things, and especially the impacts that they can have on our well-being, and in particular, a particular fascination of mine, our circadian rhythms, and ultimately, how that influences and affects all areas of our mind, our body and spirit.
Yeah, when I wrote my book about addiction, I was concerned about the screens, taking real-time activities away from the children. And, that you start to see kids that can't make eye contact with you, for example, way back when in 2009, 2010, when the problem was getting worse and worse. But, when you get into the circadian side of the story, it's a bigger picture. There's more going on than just the playing of the games. It's what the toxic lighting is actually doing to their development.
Yeah, absolutely, and and I can speak to that with first-hand experience. I got into kind of video gaming at the age of 13. I'd achieved a scholarship to a private school in the area that I live in, Guernsey in the Channel Islands in the United Kingdom, and I kind of didn't really fit in at the school. I'd come from a public education background. I was surrounded by a lot of people who were slightly higher socio-economic status background than I was, and by the age of about 13, it was clear that I didn't really necessarily fit in. I think I'm sort of the only person who's always been a bit of a black swan. I've never really wanted to truly fit into a lot of society's kind of mainstream paradigms and concepts, and there was a little bit of bullying going on at school, and so I found solace in playing some video games with my friends. And you've got to imagine that this was going back 17, 18 years, not far from the time at which you were kind of raising the flag about this, but it was around the time, maybe a year or two before the first iPhone came out. I had a Dell computer with a dial-up modem broadband. It certainly wasn't any high-speed connections. Video gaming had been around, I'm sure, on different variety of consoles for maybe even a decade or longer, 2 decades before that. But I found my way into a massive multiplayer online game, and I look back at it now, and it brought many benefits to my life. I learned how to socialize with people all over the world. I became very accepting of different cultures, people of different ages. It really fine-tuned a lot of my social skills, and it taught me quite a lot about dedication in some ways, because it was the sort of game that you didn't necessarily log in and log off and get a huge hit of dopamine. You were always working towards something in the future, and I really enjoyed that about that game in particular. But the problem was, the more I spent time in that world, kind of creating friends offline or online, I should say, and achieving more and more in the game, it obviously began to play with my neurochemistry at a very young age, right? And so that sense of reward and motivation and drive that a usual teenager might seek from sports or reading a book or playing with friends or completing their homework or whatever we do as conditioned people in the modern world. And that kind of hit of dopamine was beginning to be filled from computer and video gaming. And so it went from a few hours, in the evenings, probably after school, coming home, rushing to get on the computer. And then, my mum sort of turning the internet off at maybe 7 or 8 p.m. in time for me to go to bed. And that very quickly transformed into, later and later nights. When I was 15 years old, I actually dropped out of the private school that I was attending. I had decided that after a long summer off of pretty much spending all the time in my room video gaming, that I no longer wanted to go to school. So dropped out there, and by that point I ballooned on a lot of weight. I don't mean a lot of weight. I hold a lot of stretch marks on my body and a lot of signs that demonstrated just how fast I gained a lot of weight in my youth. And then cue the anxiety, the social anxiety, the depression, the lack of motivation and interest to connect with my family, my friends, my school years. And by that point I was probably the majority of nights of the week as a 15 or 16 year old boy, I guess, essentially staying awake until like 1 a.m. 2 a.m. And at that time I had no awareness of what this was doing to my body clock. All I wanted to do was game, and all that my mum wanted to do was make sure I made it to school in the morning. So dragging a teenager out of bed after 5 or 6 hours sleep most nights was a pretty much a recipe for disaster in terms of my social relationships and also my schooling. So I was the kid that was asleep on the table and the desk in the first couple of lessons every morning. I'm quite fortunate that I think a lot of my education prior to that meant that I managed to kind of skim through a lot of my exams and the various things I was doing around that age. And then it wasn't until about 16 or 17 when I really took a sidestep from that and began to re-immerse myself back into life. But really that was only the beginning of a journey for me, because at 17 or 18 I was, I'm not sure what it is in pounds for the kind of American Canadian listeners, but I was about 110, 120 kilos at the time. It was about somewhere around 17, 18 stone in weight, which is a lot for a teenager of that age. And I had confidence issues. I was extremely unfit. Neurologically, I'm sure I was experiencing quite severe ADHD-like symptoms. As I said, when I stopped video gaming, I was really quite depressed for a while. And it took me kind of, almost the better part of another 7 or 8 years, treading some slightly conventional routes to, moving more and eating less and focusing on the calories and the macros and all those things that conventional health and fitness tells you, until I really began to understand what had actually happened to me as a teenager and how, disrupted my body's rhythms had become, how that had influenced how my brain had matured, what I even as an adult, what I found pleasurable and unpleasurable and the activities that I enjoyed and I didn't enjoy. And then, about 5 or 6 years ago, I really found the emerging world of quantum and circadian science. And thankfully, since that time, I've really been able to spend, a good portion of it rehabilitating my brain in the best ways I can.
That's fantastic, and you're sharing it with others, which is fantastic as well. And I know that you did a study, a fascinating study. And this, of course, listeners need to know that your work is a labor of love. And so when you set forth to do this study in Guernsey at the Guernsey's Schools Sleep Project, you set it out with, I think you had some sponsors, but you did this unpaid. And you made some really interesting findings when you tested the amber colored, the blue light blocking glasses on children in schools. And maybe you can discuss a lot of what you found in terms of the outcomes of that particular study.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. And maybe prior to talking about the outcomes, I'll talk a little bit about like the motivations and the path that led us to that. So around about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even longer now, about 7 or 8 years ago, I experienced a period of burnout in my young career as a nutritionist and a functional medicine health coach. I had some relationship issues going on in my career and my personal life. And I kind of experienced that sort of childhood burnout again. I was, burning the candle at both ends, trying to make business work, a little bit stressed, a little bit of escapism at the weekends, a little bit too much television, those sorts of things. And I stumbled into the world of quantum biology through some of the work of Jack Kruse, who, so many people come to find this particular area because of Uncle Jack. And at the time, what I did was I purchased myself a pair of blue light blocking glasses from a company called RAR Optics. They were one of the first people providing these kinds of lenses. And the purpose behind the lenses is that they block out very specific wavelengths of light. And we know through empirical data that these wavelengths of light stimulate the brain, and they stimulate like dopamine. They can result in production of cortisol at the wrong time of day, which is one of our major stress hormones, which leads to increases in adrenaline and increases in alertness. And they directly suppress the release of pineal gland melatonin. So I started using these glasses, and in fact, I don't know if anybody will be watching this, but I'll pop a pair of them on now. You can see what they look like. And the first night that I wore these glasses, I felt a complete transformation in my sleep. And so kind of weeks went on, months went on. I was working with clients, trying to convince them to buy these glasses, but they were very, very expensive, and they were only available in America at the time. And so time goes on, 1 year, 2 years, I started to find like my comfort in teaching people around sleep and started to niche my business in that area. And I was working with a lot of adults, and I found that, some adults were very apt to embrace this kind of circadian lifestyle that I was advocating for. And then other people would really struggle. And sometimes I would work with families, and, we would kind of provide lifestyle information, education, and these blue light blocking glasses to kids and their families. And I would often find that the kids would follow through with the advice, but the adults wouldn't. And so it would kind of be a conversation around the dinner table of like, Mum, Dad, why didn't you wear your blue light blocking glasses? It's obvious they help. I slept better. Why wouldn't you want to? And so that was just really intriguing to me. And it got me thinking a lot about like, obviously I was once a child who could have really benefited from that. And I didn't really think too much into it at the time, but it was just an interesting observation to me that, it seemed like children were more forthcoming in wanting to change their behaviors and feel better, as a result of that. Then you fast forward probably about another 6 months, and I was taking a business accelerator program, and they were asking me, what's your origin story? If you have an audience as an entrepreneur, you have a business, you need to be able to connect with your audience. And I realized throughout a series of workshops that I undertook that actually, the person that I most wanted to help was the person that I once was. And back when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, Pam, I was the only child that I knew who used technology so much. Okay, I had friends that played Xbox and computer games, and they probably spent a little bit too much time on them, and maybe it affected their schoolwork a little bit. But I was the only child I knew who I was so severely circadian disrupted that quite literally my life was at stake. There are periods of time in my life where I tried to detox from late nights and video games and things like that, and I was quite literally suicidal. I didn't really have any motivation to do anything else in my life to live for. And so I kind of had this realization that maybe, it was the kids and maybe it was the teenagers that I wanted to support and help. And that was affirmed to me a couple of weeks later when I had a very bizarre dream, if you can imagine it, where I was stood on a television program in the United Kingdom. I know it was a dream because the TV program doesn't exist anymore. And I was addressing kind of like the nation, which is a bit grandiose. But I was talking about how we'd done like a research project where we had provided children and teenagers with access to some simple interventions, things like blue light blocking glasses, the nighttime ones with the amber lens, and maybe some sleep and circadian health education. And we'd essentially transformed a generation of youth. And so I woke up from this dream and I was there like, oh, dang, I've got to do this thing. And at the time, as a young entrepreneur, it's difficult to make ends meet. I was a solopreneur, juggling all the marketing and the sales and the delivery of the projects and the services that I was trying to provide the world. But there was this burning desire and this voice within me to conduct this study. And so over the course of 2 years, I registered a charity. I will also probably caveat the whole of this with, the universe had my back the entire time. Every time I needed a sponsor, the right person, turned up at the 11th hour. When I needed somebody to help me flesh out the research proposals that I had to put towards the ethics committee, I had a researcher from a very prestigious university get in touch with me, and he shadowed me and helped me with some of that work. And so I was always assisted in many ways. But yeah, you're correct. I worked freely on that project for until now. All of the projects that I've been working on, including the CRD challenge, have been on a voluntary basis. And what we did was we went into schools in Guernsey, of which there are 7. So we have quite a small population here. We often joke around and we call it testbed nation, because we've got a small population, 60,000 people crammed into 50 kind of square kilometres. And we have a very close connection with our education authorities, our health authorities, the government. And we don't necessarily follow what the United Kingdom are doing. We have a little bit of a kind of crown dependency and a reign of our own. And so eventually I convinced enough teachers in enough schools, enough principals that they should take this stuff seriously after writing proposals and, basically hunting these people down, having the discussions. And we found sponsors for the project. And then what we did was in the beginning of 2023, we put together what is called an open level waitlist study. And so we divided about 400, 500 children across these 7 secondary schools, so age 13 through to 17 or 18. We divided them into 4 groups. And what we wanted to do was try and study empirically, what are perhaps some of the benefits from blue light blocking glasses and sleep and circadian health education for this group, especially as it pertains to, their sleep quality, their sleep consistency, their alertness, their stress and anxiety. And so we put children into one of 4 groups. The first group, they received a pair of blue light blocking glasses with an amber lens. And that was sponsored, I should add, by my wonderful friend Rudy Nassif over at Viva Rays. So they provided the lens technology. And we gave those kids a pair of blue light blocking glasses and said, just wear them for 3 hours before bed. We had another group of kids, Group B, and we provided the same intervention, the glasses, but we also gave them 2 sleep and circadian health workshops. In the third group, we just gave the workshops, the educational workshops, and these workshops, they spoke about things like morning and evening routines. They touched on artificial light and helped people understand blue light, but we didn't actually provide the tool, the intervention, which was the glasses. And then the 4th group was a waiting list group. So they acted as kind of like active control group. And what we did is over a course of 4 weeks, we took questionnaires at day 0, day 14 and day 28 to ascertain changes that happen to these indices of sleep throughout the study. And as you might expect, anyone who's used blue light blocking glasses before religiously or consistently at least, and we'll know that these things, have such a strong physiological impact on the body in terms of our ability to wind down, rest, recover, produce more melatonin, and get good quality sleep. And so the results that we saw were pretty astounding in both the glasses and the glasses in education group. There was massive, statistically significant improvements across all the variables. In the education only group, there were improvements, not as strong as in the glasses groups. And now we're about to publish the data from that study, not academically at this time. I've had a few too many other spinning plates to kind of go down that route, but we're about to publish a white paper in about the next month. I'm not sure when this episode is going to be airing, but hopefully by the end of October, we'll have that study published. And really, that was just the beginning, It was great to be able to do that. And I suppose I sat there every day in my meditation, contemplation in the morning, just knowing that, by moving forward and, responding to whatever it was the universe was throwing at me on a day-to-day basis to achieve, the result of that study, that I hoped it would lead on to finding other people around the world, such as yourself and everyone else we're now working with, who were also passionate about and cared about this subject, and that we might, begin to make some real global change.
Now, before we talk about a few other things, I just want to ask, did that study get the attention of any other schools or school boards or anywhere in the world?
Yeah, so I've been contacted by quite a few interested parties from other schools. One of the things for us, unfortunately, as so happens in circumstances where you're, relying on volunteers, we had some kind of delays to the data analysis and the publication of that paper. So I've known the results of the paper personally for the last year, but it's taken us quite a while to get to the point where we can publish. So I haven't been reaching out to schools or putting the results of it really out into the public domain yet. But of those people who have heard me talk about it on podcasts, on newsletters and things like that, I've had a lot of interest from a lot of other places. And, part of our movements next are generating community around these topics so that we can begin to disseminate these tools and interventions into what I would call, first adopters, places that we don't have to, knock the door down to get into, and places who, welcome this quite contemporary, education with open arms.
Yes, and so I've heard you speak before on the science behind why it's important to wear blue light blockers and why it's important to time your lighting hygiene accordingly. And I wonder if you can share with the listeners why it's so important to wear the blue light blockers and why it's so important to minimize our exposure to artificial light and maximize our exposure to the natural sunlight.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And I want to caveat this by saying that, by no means is just blocking blue light at night the only important step that we take to harness true circadian rhythmicity and to realign ourselves with nature and to embody all of the benefits that can bring. But quite often for people, it's the lowest hanging fruit. It's the quickest, simplest thing that we can do to make a profound impact on the way that we live every day of our lives. And really, it comes down to this idea and this understanding that, human beings evolved in a natural environment. And part of being in that natural environment is interacting with various different cues provided by nature that influence and train our circadian rhythms. And for anybody who doesn't know what a circadian rhythm is, we're talking about the biological clocks in the brain. There's a master clock in the area of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Trust me, I've had a lot of practice learning how to say that. And then we have, these peripheral clocks in every system and every organ and every cell of the body. And light is what we know as the primary or the master Zeitgeber, so a German word that means time giver. And so throughout the entirety of our evolution as human beings living outdoors within nature, it was light from the sun, which, adapted seasonally, the length of the day, the strength of the light, the qualities given off by the sun that would reach our skin and our eyes are the major cue which impacts the oscillation of all these cells, systems, organs, and ultimately our circadian rhythms. So, around about 150 years ago, we kind of began to sleepwalk into this idea that, a brighter life was better, and that the more electricity and the more electric light that we could bring into our society, the more productivity we would experience. But the problem is that, over the last 150 years, the lighting industry has rushed to create more and more energy efficiency lighting without any value and understanding of the impact that this has on our biological systems. And I believe it's only within the last decade that the molecular mechanisms for the circadian rhythm have really been identified. I think there was a Nobel Prize given in 2017. And so we're now in this precarious position where we've created all of these types of lighting, light bulbs, screens, devices, public lighting, school lighting, home lighting, and a lot of it is directly in conflict with how our body's rhythms want to express themselves, especially this idea of blue light. And so to kind of demystify that, people often think that blue light is the boogeyman, and blue light is very natural. It's a wavelength, a specific wavelength, a short wavelength, a high energy wavelength of light from the sun. And every day it was found through scientific research that blue light stimulates a very special photoreceptor in our eye called melanopsin, which sends a signal to the brain which orchestrates the timing of our circadian system. And so out in nature, we would be exposed to a lot of blue light from the break of dawn all the way until sunset. But after sunset, when it gets dark outside, there will be a complete absence of this light until the next day. And now, unfortunately, we've created environments that bathe us in that type of light from artificial sources at night. And so where the blue light blocking glasses come in, as well as other strategies that we use, things like filters for mobile phones and laptops and tablets that can change the light, the color and the wavelength of light coming from the screen, or circadian friendly lighting options around the home, candles or different types of light bulbs that are devoid of that blue light. Where they come in helpful is that they allow us to live in the modern world, live around these types of technology, but not experience so many of the contraindications associated with the bright artificial blue, which in our natural environment was only available as a stimulus to drive activity and alertness during the daytime.
Right. And so what else can you do, basically? I mean, what are the strategies? I've heard things like dimming your lights. You talked a little bit about, the remediation, but are there more specific things people can do without breaking their budget? Dimmers are great. I mean, I actually use a little lantern and I walk through my house with a little lantern. It's not perfect, but it does emit an orange light and it's solar powered. So I just put it outside and I charge it up. So I've told my friends I do this and they laugh at me. But is there anything, I mean, I've heard people talk about using even red Christmas lamps or Christmas lights, to line the floor in case they have to get up during the night to go to the bathroom. What else can people do? Little tricks that they can do to try to minimize their exposure to the white lights that have a lot of the blue in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, kind of relates into what we were discussing in the beginning of the podcast, which is the Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge. So when we came up for the idea for this challenge, it was with the knowledge that, there's a lot of information out there, but it can be very overwhelming. You suddenly hear that you have to eliminate all the blue light and there's all these different options and you don't really know which one to choose and you're not really sure if it's going to work or not. So you don't want to invest in light bulbs or specific lamps or, even blue light blocking glasses necessarily to begin with. And so what we've done throughout the challenge is, week by week, we begin to unfold this information in a way in which really respects the way that human beings adapt and create behavioral change, especially in a supportive community and environment surrounded by other people who are going through similar experiences. And we really begin by explaining to people that the lowest hanging fruit is this nighttime light environment, and there are kind of different levels to participation, and obviously the further you go into this participation and the more you commit, hopefully going all in eventually, the greater benefits you're going to see in terms of your energy, your mood, your productivity, your sleep, and the knock-on impact that has to all areas of your health. And so what we say, there are kind of 4 levels of participation. The first one is a recognition that actually there are 2 things going on with light in the evening that disrupt our rhythms. The first is the wavelength, so the color of the light. So we need to try and create an absence of the what we call shorter wavelengths, the higher energy wavelengths, which are the blues and the greens, because these again are found during natural daylight. And there's also this factor which is the lux, or the luminosity, the brightness of lighting. Okay, so we say at the most basic level, it's about dimming lights, turning off overhead lights, using below eye level lamps. Dimming the screens on your devices, your computers, your televisions, and that can knock out a lot of the brightness, which can allow the brain to begin to relax and produce more of that melatonin. The next step really that we prioritize around and we focus is then beginning to use free options for different applications and technology programs that can actually change the type of light that comes from your screens. So if you're a big fan and a big user of an Apple mobile phone in the evening, there is actually a manual setting that you can use to completely eliminate all of the bluer and the greener wavelengths of light. And the same is true for laptops, tablets. There's a program called Flux, another one called Iris. People can take their pick, and we kind of give reasons, benefits for and to some of these different things. And so considering that the majority of people are using some form of technology in the evening, that's a very effective step. The third step, and this is where you really start to see the most benefit, is applying blue light blocking glasses. So if you are in an environment where you have conventional LEDs, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, we still have to do all the things that we need to do in the evening, right? Just because the winter comes and things get darker earlier in the Northern Hemisphere, where I live, for example, doesn't mean we go to bed at 6 p.m. when the sun sets. So we still have to live regular lives. And this is where, if we're not at the position where we want to change the light bulbs in our house, a pair of blue light blocking glasses is a great tool to use, because they are ultimately going to cover your iris and your lens from absorbing those shorter wavelengths of light. And especially if you're going out and about, spending time at friends' houses, you're out walking the streets in the evening, or you're around public lighting, which is not circadian friendly, it's a great option. And then the final step, really the all in, and this is I think where people begin to see the most radical shift, is if you adopt kind of like a blue light free environment in the evening. So I have a few particular lamps that I've bought from the local hardware store. It was nothing crazy expensive. I probably spent $50 or $60 on a few like cheap lamp fixtures. I bought a few light bulbs that are red or amber light bulbs from specific websites, and we have links into some of the most innovative companies doing this kind of lighting. And I use those in the evening. So, if I'm not on my computer device, I don't actually have any requirement to wear blue light blocking glasses, because in my bedroom, in my living area, in my bathroom, I have, small motion sensor lights, or I have a few bulbs which actually are what we would call circadian friendly. So they don't contain any of that blue and that green light, and they're quite dim, so they create that perfect environment, kind of like sitting around a fire in the evening, right? That kind of warm glow without any of that detrimental light, which is that circadian sort of wake up stimulus. So overall, I get that a lot of people are somewhat concerned, or I guess the word would be skeptical about a lot of this stuff. How could the light in my environment possibly impact me? No one's told me about this, right? I've been living this way for my entire life. And so I say to people, begin by dimming lights, begin by using these free applications and filters. If you have a shred of faith in this at all, get some blue light blocking glasses. And then usually from there, people are, a lot more sold into the idea that, it has a phenomenal impact on their health.
Right. And so you say that, the circadian rhythm disruption is affecting 100% or nearly 100% of the population. Yet maybe only 1% or less actually know about it. And I've heard that, for those of us who know about it, maybe 10% will adopt the measures necessary to remediate. So we have a lot of work cut out for us, I think, to educate people about circadian rhythm disruption. So what do you think, with your challenge coming up, and it's, again, it's launching on October 20th, and I would encourage everybody to go to your website, the crdchallenge.com, and join up. And you also have on school, you also have a support group there as well that people can sign up for that. So I will encourage people to get involved. And if you have any doubt, I talked to your other co-founder, Jeff Gibson, and he said he doubted at first too, and now he's a believer, So if you're a naysayer and you think this is all woo-woo, I would say join, make the necessary changes, and see for yourself, feel it for yourself. I know that there's a lot of people out there who are having a lot of trouble sleeping, and that's the focus of my work, is to help people improve their sleep quality. So I don't think you have anything to lose for trying this, because in our bad mood epidemic, we have a bad mood epidemic right now, and there's a lot of quote unquote solutions going on out there. And if you haven't gone down this path, I think it's something everybody needs to embrace.
I agree wholeheartedly, and it's not just a bad mood epidemic. Let's be real. We have a non-communicable disease pandemic almost that's happening. Every chronic disease from metabolic to psychiatric to neurological, neurodegenerative. Even as early as infancy in children these days, their growth and development is completely off the trajectory compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago, even when a lot of these lighting solutions and devices weren't available. And it's very interesting, isn't it? We were discussing a lot as a group and as a collective how we could demonstrate to people that this is something that they should invest even a small amount of time in. We're not asking a lot from people to attend this challenge. It's completely free. We wanted to provide it at zero cost to consumer. We have a charity which will be funding future research and education in schools, and so we've deployed it through the work of our company and our charity. And what we spent time doing, in fact, Jeff has spent time doing, I must take my hat off to him, is he's interviewed over 75 people, I believe, so far, to really elucidate their stories around this stuff. Because what you have is an emerging industry of practitioners who are, often qualified in other areas, nutritionists or doctors or therapists in different ways, who began to adopt these circadian principles, those that we'll be teaching in the challenge. It's not just about light at night, it's also about, a profound understanding of how natural light influences our physiology, the wavelengths and the qualities of that light over the course of the day, probably a little bit too much to discuss on this podcast. But also things like food timing, an aspect that we call chrononutrition, so how the timing of the food that we eat influences our metabolism, and then also things such as our connection to nature, these kind of fringe topics such as grounding or earthing, that idea of hippies with their shoes off on the grass, hugging trees. It's very well documented now in conventional kind of circles and science that there's so much empirical data behind all of this stuff, and what we wanted to do was present it in a way that people just understand it, not at a high level concept where there's too much scientific rigor and too much vernacular involved, but that we could showcase the stories of everyday people who have had their lives fundamentally transformed through some of these simple, and I mean really simple, adjunctive practices. Asking anybody to give up or change their diets, or give up their exercises, or give up their jobs, or give up all the things that stress them out on a daily basis. We're just explaining how when you begin to reconnect with nature, that fundamentally reconnects you with yourself and provides you with more energy and more mental clarity to be the person that you want to be, to have the impact that you want to have amongst your friends, your family, your community. And so really the CRD challenge is like a grassroots attempt at us to inspire future generations of decentralized thinkers, people who can reconnect with themselves and reconnect with nature and can hold that vision and that possibility for a better world, one where we're not reliant on pharmaceuticals. Not that I'm against the use of pharmaceuticals in some certain cases, but really a progressive future where we don't have to rely so much on systems, which a whole other conversation altogether, and work more as businesses than the therapeutic and perhaps life-giving paradigms that being a doctor or being a physician once was.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of categories of people that I'm very concerned about as well. The people who think that it's natural to be a night owl. And there's another group of people that think sleep is for the weak, and they may sleep 5 or 6 hours and they think it's adequate, but there are going to be long-term health repercussions from that. So, I mean, if you're in those two categories, I would highly encourage you to try and embrace some of this, because not getting enough sleep has, huge ramifications, and even in terms of your cognition and memory and its effect on, contribution towards developing conditions such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. And there's a lot of research showing this, that sleep is extremely, extremely healing to the body. And if you're not getting enough sleep, it's going to have a huge impact on your overall health. So I think a lot of the stigma attached to sleep and sleep quality is, it's been a disaster for society. I mean, when you were a kid and you were playing those video games and you were sleeping maybe 5 or 6 hours a night,
how many people said, oh, Daniel looks really tired. He needs to be sleeping 8 or 9 hours. What's going on here? How many people took you aside or took your parents aside and said, this is unacceptable. So I think we need to be much more aware of the timing of our sleep, the amount of time that we sleep, what time we're going to bed. All of these things need to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really interesting point to discuss is, public health, agendas, they tend to base their motivation on abject fear, right? So now, we have this huge wave of information popularized largely by people like Professor Matthew Walker, who wrote Why We Sleep, the book probably came out almost a decade ago now. And it talks a lot about all of the detriments associated with not getting enough sleep, metabolic issues, weight issues, stress issues, cardiovascular issues, detoxification issues, neurodegenerative issues, like mood and behavioral issues, everything you can possibly imagine, right? Really sleep being that like tide that raises all the ships in the harbor, as Matthew once said. But I'm far more interested in, talking about it from a positive emotional attraction, right? That, every single area of your mind, body and spirit, flourishes when you sleep better. And quite often people think, I haven't got enough time. I've got busy responsibilities, family, maybe I'm high up in business or the corporate world. And I often say to people, a lot of these circadian changes, they don't cost you your relationships. They don't cost you your entertainment. All they do is they improve the quality and the depth of your sleep so that you can make better choices. You can be more effective, you can be more motivated, more driven, more ethical, more creative, more innovative. You can have a better body composition, all of those things through some very, very simple, lifestyle related changes. And quite frankly, when adults make these sorts of changes, it has a, profound impact on their families and the youth and future generations. So, I used to think that it was a hard sell, and I think that's because I was quite often selling people on the idea of fear. But these days, we tried to work through more of an inspirational lens to explain to people that if you're not ready for this yet, at least we've told you what's possible. And when you want to feel into and lean into that future possibility for yourself of life being better than maybe it is now, and you striving towards that vibrancy and the health that you really deserve as a human being, then you know where we are.
Have the children followed up with you at all, the ones that were in the 500 child study? Have you seen any long-term effects? I mean, it's only been a short while. I mean, the study was a year ago, but have you followed up with any of the kids, or have any of the kids reached out to you to say thank you, or I'm still wearing my blue light blockers and I feel much better?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. I because we have a very small community here in Guernsey, right? I quite often meet people who I don't know in the street who will come up to me and say, "Oh, my son or my daughter is part of your project. They still wear their glasses every night. We got them for the whole family." Or I used to get messages like, "Oh, my son or daughter has broken or lost his glasses. Have you got any more?" Like he's desperate for them. They were so beneficial. And when I went back into schools, a lot of kids came up to me and they were like, like I'm obviously a dude, right? I'm a young guy, so they're like, "Yo, dude, those things really work, don't they, dude?" And I'm there like, yeah, they do. And I only
Wow.
wish that at my age, I had had a pair of those because, you know, going back to the whole idea of like gaming and entertainment, you will have some people that say technology is the bane of the earth, it's destroying us, it's reducing our cognitive capacity and all these sorts of things. But I think to like drive that wedge and to polarize and say that this thing is so terrible, we should never touch it, you unfortunately lose touch with and you fall out of resonance with the general population. Because a lot of people, myself included, sometimes enjoy playing a video game or relaxing or switching off to a series on Netflix or something like that. And I don't think there's any like distinct harm in that. It's obviously, the rituals and the routines and the discipline that you show around that. But quite frankly, it's the light. And again, there are popular speakers in the space such as Jack Kruse who talk about the real, or what they perceive to be the real implications of why lighting has been developed in the way that it is. But the truth is, blue light, this kind of high spike blue wavelength from these conventional cool white LEDs, it is addictive. It keeps people using technology longer, watching television longer, etc. And when you remove that stimulus of the blue light through the use of the glasses or filters and things like that, I might this evening watch an episode of my favorite show and I'll probably be almost asleep by the end of it. because you just don't get that same physiological response in the body. So that's what I've seen a lot of from children, is that them saying, oh, I'm sleeping so much better, I'm feeling so much better, I'm performing better in my exams. And, the schools that I've followed up with and spoken to, who will all be invited to participate in our kind of ongoing education as we continue to develop, I've heard only, good things from them.
That's fantastic. Now, as we wind down here, again, I can't encourage people enough to visit your website, the crdchallenge.com, and to join up into this challenge. It's launching officially on October 20th, and Daniel will be providing a lot of education and a lot of support to help you implement these changes. But before we completely wind down here, I want to ask you one last question, and that is, what is your dream circadian day?
Oh, my dream circadian day, that's fantastic. Is it the one on the beach in Hawaii, or is it the reality of the life that I live? Can I just double
Uh,
check?
One or the other.
Brilliant. So I live in the UK, right? I live on an island called Guernsey, as I said, off the coast of England. And right now, we're heading into the fall, into the autumn season. And so, in the mornings I wake up usually before sunrise, and so I keep, the lighting very dim. I may wear blue light blocking glasses in the morning, or use my red and amber bulbs until the sun rises, because I don't want to stress my body out with that really bright blue light signal. And then around the time of sunrise, I'll go out for a walk, rain or shine, if I'm in my jacket, my coat. In the summer, I might do it topless if it's warm enough. But I get outside at the time of sunrise to receive that light information that can program and set and entrain my rhythms. And then I make a really purposeful effort to spend periods of time outdoors during the daytime. In the summer, it's a lot easier. I can work outdoors, I can tether my internet and my laptop and find a bench somewhere. Now that it's raining, I'm just looking out the window as I'm recording this. Now that it's raining, I'll probably put my jacket on after this call and go for a quick walk around the block just to get a light break, to make sure that my brain and my body and my circadian rhythms are constantly attenuated by that natural light signal. And then in the evening, I will eat my dinner around the time of sunset, which again, varies across the seasons. I will begin to lower the lighting, use the circadian friendly lighting, wind down on my activities, maybe watch a show, read a book, spend time with my partner, my friends. Beginning slowly towards, that period for me, it's about 9 p.m. I head to bed, usually asleep by 9:30. And that's not because I was, an early bird person that always got up at the crack of dawn. It's because when I made those light related changes and improvements to my circadian rhythm through, my environment, the time at which I eat, my body naturally found itself in a rhythm of wanting to sleep quite early and wanting to wake quite early, well refreshed. So that's kind of my ideal evening. It's not always ideal. Sometimes I go out and see friends and go out for a meal, eat a little bit later. I don't apply these principles strictly, routinely every single day of my life. But ultimately, if more often than not, I am sticking with the correct evolutionary appropriate signals when it comes to light and food timing and such like that, then, my circadian life and my wider life is, in a very good place.
Oh, that's very inspirational. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the work that you're doing. And I'd love to have you back on the show, and we'll follow up with the Circadian Rhythm Disruption Challenge. We'll follow up with that maybe in a few months and see how it's going. But thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. And if I may say, with regards to the CRD challenge, a lot of people from around the world have signed up to take part so far. We launched only about 3 days ago, the public recruitment phase, and we've got over 1,000 people so far that have registered their emails to take part. So there's clearly, a hunger for this. And whatever time people are listening to this, whether it's before or after the challenge launches, it will be an evergreen event. So if people want to come and learn some of the basics of circadian rhythms, circadian health in a supportive community, myself and my colleagues, Avi, Jeff and Lauren, will be there to support and guide alongside, 150 other ambassadors, people who are practitioners, therapists, doctors, within their own right, in this space who know about and understand this science. So you will not be alone. You will be surrounded by people who have no idea what they're doing, and they will learn over that slow process. So we would love to see you in that community, and we would love to light a spark of inspiration in you so that that wave may ripple out into the world and into the universe. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking your valuable time to join us today.
The information provided on my website, community forum, and podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. We are not licensed medical professionals, and the content shared here is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are seeking health advice or have specific medical concerns, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified medical doctor or healthcare provider. They are trained to evaluate your individual health needs and provide personalized recommendations tailored to your unique circumstances. By accessing and using my website, participating in my member forum, or listening to my podcast, you agree to acknowledge and abide by this disclaimer. We do not assume any responsibility or liability for actions taken based on the information provided herein.